Solo mining is the embodiment of the original dream, a defiant act of individual sovereignty where one person, one node, and one miner take a stand against centralized control. We don't just mine for profit, we mine for principle. We mine for ourselves and for each other and for the unyielding spirit at Bitcoin's core. Join us as we dig in and hold the line. This is the Home Mining Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Home Mining Podcast by Satoshi, where we explore the tools, ideas, and technologies shaping a freer, more private future. I'm your host, TwoSats, and today I am so stoked to have Matt Hill, co-founder and CEO of Start9, on the podcast, a company revolutionizing digital sovereignty through personal servers. Matt's work spans privacy-focused projects like Graphene OS and now Start9, which empowers users to run their own Bitcoin nodes, private messaging, file storage, and more, all from a simple plug-and-play server. In this episode, we'll deep dive into how Bitcoin mining, sovereignty, and privacy intersect, and why owning your digital life matters more now in 2025 than ever before. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, I want to get right into the meat of everything with you because you've got a lot of great thoughts and opinions and experience. So let's just right off the top dive into defining digital sovereignty in 2025. You know, you've described Start9's mission as enabling sovereign computing. And I'd love if you could just touch on how you define digital sovereignty today, and especially in the context of Bitcoin and the growing centralization of the internet.
Sure. Yeah, great. So sovereignty and digital sovereignty, more specifically, is referring to the degree of control that someone has over that aspect of their life. So a totally sovereign being would be effectively have total control over every action and be able to perform those actions with impunity. And so when we refer to digital sovereignty, what we're talking about is your ability to do whatever it is that you want to do in the digital realm without being, without after asking permission, with a high degree of censorship resistance, if not total, and to be able to do so with minimal to no cost, at least unnecessary or third-party imposed costs. Right? There's obvious cost to anything in life, whether it's just a few seconds of your time or, you know, the money to rent a resource or something. But as of right now, the vast majority of humans do not interact with computers or the digital realm in a sovereign way. We are 100% the opposite of that, which would be, slaves or subjects. We are not the owners of our own territory. We do not make our own rules. We abide by the rules that are created for us, and we really have almost no say in the matter. And so our goal is to help bring about the emergence of a new computing paradigm that puts humans, individuals, families, businesses, right, at any level, in total, absolute control of their computing devices and the information that flows through and is stored on those devices.
Yeah, an extremely noble goal, and I'm so excited to break down why and how you do that. And, let's start with why this concept is so critical in an era of surveillance and data monopolies.
Most people do not know how the internet works. They don't know how computers work, I guess, and the internet being one way that we use computers. But if they did, it'd be quite terrifying. And it can be summed up kind of in the following analogy. Imagine that you were in somebody else's house and had to abide by all of their rules, right? So you want to talk to your friend Joe. You have to go to some building or house that is not your own and abide by all the rules. You take your shoes off at the door. You have to drink this certain drink. You have to do the things, or you don't get to be there. You don't get to talk to Joe. Then while you're talking to Joe, there are, 20 or 30 people all wearing different T-shirts representing a different company, sitting there listening to the conversation, taking notes, storing the transcript of the conversation in various filing cabinets. And that's kind of the nature of how we exist on computers and on the internet today. In the analog world, in meat space, we would never accept something like that. We would be like, why do I have to go to this special building that's controlled by the government or Google to talk to my friend? And then why, when I'm there, is everything I'm saying being recorded and then ultimately used to, send me spam junk mail that I didn't request. And then also I'm being charged for this entire thing, right? I have to pay entry to the building, and then I have to pay you every 5 minutes while I'm in there. It's just the ridiculousness of it is immediately apparent, and we would never accept it. And the only reason that we accept it in the digital realm is because it's largely obfuscated. We don't see it. We don't realize that that is, in fact, how we are interacting. And so it is. And we not only come to the conclusion, as many would, that that is an undignified manner of existence, that is the existence of a child or a slave or that it is also unsustainable. It's just impractical, that this model simply collapses under its own weight given enough time. The incentives are wrong, right? This model creates an incentive towards broader and more acute surveillance. It creates incentives to censor. It obviously opens up opportunities for extortion, right? If there's a piece of software or SaaS product that you or your business need for your daily lives, and it's very difficult to switch to a different ecosystem or product, then they can just ratchet up the prices at will and create this sort of extortionary, monopolistic behavior. And so, and then lastly, it's highly insecure. When everyone is communicating through and storing their data on the same third-party servers, those servers are inevitably going to be breached simply because there are people in the world that have keys to those servers, and people are fallible and will eventually be socially engineered to give up those keys. So you can almost guarantee that any database worth hacking will eventually be hacked. It's just a matter of time. And so for all those reasons, we look at this model of computing, most commonly referred to as cloud computing, and is the dominant form of computing on Earth. It's really the only way that people engage in cyberspace, as entirely unsustainable, undignified, and will probably be viewed by posterity in retrospect as a silly little mistake that humans made at the dawn of the computing age. And so we think beyond that, and we imagine a computing paradigm that is both sustainable and dignified to, give humanity what it deserves in the information age. And we arrive at this concept of sovereign computing, which is what we are helping to bring about through our technology.
Oh man, I love everything about that. Do you, on a personal level, like that's always bothered me, and it doesn't seem to bother the vast majority of users out there, right? Like in the crypto space, like the difference between crypto and Bitcoin, right? No admin keys and, kind of more privacy and control and sovereignty versus all these other altcoins that, somebody has the admin keys for and can just turn off and rug and wipe, in an instant. People still invest in that stuff, right? And it doesn't seem to bother most people on that level, nor on the personal computing level. It's always just bothered me. I can't point to the first moment where like I realized like this is a difference between being free and being a slave. But what do you have a memory or like a first time where you realized that was the case for you, where like you weren't okay with all of this lack of sovereignty and privacy?
Now, I don't think I had a moment. For me, this was a kind of a snowball effect over the years, going all the way back to my pre-digital days, right? I haven't always been a coder and developer. I was in the meat space for a while. I had manufacturing businesses. I was a mechanical engineer of sorts. I grew up in a bakery. I grew up doing mass production of bread and bagels in a wholesale bagel bakery. So but the thread that led me to where I am was always a severe and relentless independence. I've always had a problem with authority for its own sake, Right? I don't mind authority if deserved and opted into. What I mind is authoritarianism, right? The sort of
Sure.
accepting authority as a default and absolute in all cases. So anyway, yeah, I'm always looking for leverage. I don't like to waste minutes, let alone lives. Like I want to use my life efficiently to achieve my goals. And where I found the most leverage was in technology, and in particular, decentralized sovereign technology, because I find it to be the most high leverage, effective way to change the world that I want in the way that I want to, right? Yes, you can go out and protest on the streets, right? And it's not that there's no benefit there. It's just very low leverage, right? And so I just looking for leverage, and I think we found it with Bitcoin and sovereign computing. I think it is hands down the most disruptive thing we can do to affect the kind of change we want to see in the world. Ultimately, the goal being increased individual freedom and prosperity. That is the goal. Is freedom and prosperity, and I don't even view that, to be honest, in some sort of a like broad like species or humanitarian sense. I'm talking about for me and my friends and my family, and especially my children, and even more, especially their children who are not born yet. That's what I think about when I think about what I do on a daily basis and why I do it. It's very personal. It's not this general sense of humans should be more free and prosperous. It's like, I want to be more free and prosperous. I want, people I know to be more free and prosperous. And of course, if everyone thinks like that, then everyone benefits from it. But yeah.
Yeah. And then listening to a lot of, your previous, spaces on Twitter and your podcast appearances, it always struck me as something deeply personal for you, which is exciting. It should be deeply personal for everybody. It starts with our own actions, and then it grows into, well, we'll all be better off if each individual takes that level of care and control over their own life. So that's awesome. And I agree with you. We're not far off. A couple generations down the line, right? That totalitarian tiptoe. Your kids' kids is what you're thinking about, and so using the most high leverage technology and tools to ensure their freedoms and sovereignty. I mean, that's doesn't get more powerful and beautiful than that. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
Let's build it. Let's build the ultimate setup here. If you could run us through a dream setup for a listener who wants maximum privacy and self-sovereignty using Start9. What's the ultimate tech stack, hardware, software, and services for running a Bitcoin node, securing communications, storing data privately? For example, would it include, the server with specific wallets or Tor? Just walk us through those components and why that matters.
Yeah. So the ideal setup really depends on the objective of the person and the threat model of the person. So what I would recommend to somebody in a despotic regime where they were an enemy of the state trying to communicate with other rebels would not be the same as what I would recommend to your average American who's trying to get Google kind of out of their hair. Not to say that we couldn't get there, but the threat model is different depending on who you are and where you are and what your goals are. So I'll kind of give a baseline one, just kind of here's what everyone should do, mm-hmm. And then you can kind of crank it up if you need to from there. So baseline, you're going to want to be using a phone that is not running iOS or Android. At least not with all the Google Play services and iCloud stuff integrated, right? Even there's a degree of variance where it's like you can connect your iPhone to iCloud or not, right? And that's on just like a stock iPhone. And so the more you kind of integrate with these systems, the more they have you, so to speak, right? And the more vulnerable you are to surveillance, censorship, extortion, and security breaches. So try to get out of the big big pools. And so use an OS that is, open source and doesn't call home to the mothership with everything. So Graphene is the best. And my recommendation and what I use, Graphene OS, is a fork of Android that has all the, Google Play services and stock Google applications removed, and it has enhanced security features and privacy features that can be tuned to your needs. And so Graphene is wonderful, and it can be run on any modern, Pixel is the ideal device to be running that on. From a laptop, desktop, computer situation, obviously running a, open source Linux OS on a core booted device would be ideal. I don't do that. I use a MacBook Pro for the majority of my computing needs. And I do that because I have made the calculation amongst my own threat model and goals that the convenience, reliability, and power afforded to me by Apple's far superior computers is worth it for these use cases. There are times if I'm going to use a computer and I don't want Apple in my hair, I can use my Linux notebook, or I can use my Graphene phone. But for the majority of the work that I do on a daily basis, I use a MacBook Pro because it just crushes everything else on the market in terms of performance and reliability. But you're going to want, again, depending on your threat model, a computer that is as open as possible, and that you don't install 18 million different applications onto. Try to keep your computer to a minimum and only install what you really need. The more things you install, the more doors you open for malware and spyware. And then the big thing, which is where kind of we come in, is what is your phone or your computer talking to, right? These things are just remote controls. Your laptop and your cell phone are mostly, for the most part, remote controls, regardless of what you're doing on them. Almost anything that you do on your computer or phone is remotely controlling another computer somewhere else, and these are called servers. And so who owns that computer? Who controls that computer? Is far more, I don't want to say more important, but equally important as to the security of the client device itself. So most people use computers as follows. You download an app onto your phone or onto your MacBook, and that app comes with a hard-coded server in it. So pick an app, right? X, we'll just use that as a social media app for a second. X comes pre-stocked with Twitter servers encoded into that application. So you open X up, and the first thing it does is connect to a X server, and you log in with your username and password, and pretty much every button you click and every scroll you take is monitored, controlled, tracked, and recorded by X, the company. Everything that you do within that app is monitored by X. It's their server, it's their house, their rules, and they have tons of employees sitting by watching every button you push. So the key is to get rid of that piece. That is the big piece that everyone misses because it's largely invisible, but is like the heart of the problem of how humans use computers, is the fact that everything on your phone and everything on your laptop are connecting to these third-party servers that you do not own or control. And so instead, you should get yourself your own server. And this is what we make possible at Start9. This is our mission, is to make it possible for a normal person. By that, I mean, an average computer literate person. We're not talking about a total person, somebody who's never seen a computer and doesn't know how to use one. And we're not talking about a Linux sysadmin. I'm talking about just a normal person who knows how to go into a settings menu and make some changes, stuff like that, which is pretty much anybody under the age of 70, to be honest, at this point. We're largely a computer literate civilization, at least first world countries. So, you, as a normal person, can own and operate a personal private server. Personal server, private cloud is a proper way to think of it. Then, from your phone or laptop, instead of downloading apps that automatically connect to these third-party servers that you don't own or control, you download apps that enable you to connect to your own server in your own home and do all the same things that you otherwise would have done with these third-party apps. So a favorite example of mine is something like Signal or WhatsApp or Telegram, right? These are all messaging apps. And by default, you download these things and they connect to the third-party servers that are run by Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp, and you communicate through them. And all your communications are intermediated. People tout Signal as being a private messenger. In a way, it is, but in a way, it's not, right? Signal is 100% an intermediated exchange. You and I are talking through Signal, which means they know we're talking. They know who we are. They know where we are. They know the approximate length of the messages being sent. There's an incredible amount of metadata that gets leaked that disrupts our privacy. The first and foremost just being the fact that the conversation exists at all is none of anybody's business. And so when you communicate through Signal, it's all of their business. There's the further argument to be made with something like Signal where, the primary adage in cyber surveillance is bad guys hide, good guys don't. That is the mantra of people who engage in these, surveillance activities like the NSA. That's their mantra. And so they don't even care about the people who are just using, standard SMS or WhatsApp to communicate. It's like, you're not a bad guy because you're not trying to hide. But if you go and you use Signal, now you're a bad guy, right? They're going, okay, this person is trying to hide. They are trying to use encryption to evade surveillance. Therefore, as a heuristic, they are at least potentially a bad guy, and we should pay very close attention to them. So you actually kind of put yourself in a different category and under a closer scope when you try to hide. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to hide. It just means that you should either don't try or succeed. Don't do this middle ground thing. Don't go use Signal and conclude that you're totally private, right? That's a trap. That's where you're supposed to go to be private. That's the state's preferred private communication tool. What you want to do is go to something that's not recommended, not preferred by the state, right? You want to use something that is actually private, where nobody knows the communication is taking place whatsoever. And to do that, the only way to do that is to run your own server, is to run your own personal private server and then connect to that server from your phone. And then the person you're talking to can also connect to that server from their phone. And now you and I can have a conversation that is not only end-to-end encrypted, just like Signal, but is also totally self-hosted and even onion routed if you want to hook it up over Tor, such that the conversation is so invisible that nobody, and I mean even the NSA, doesn't know that the conversation is taking place, let alone has the ability to drop in on it and listen. And that's real privacy. That's actual privacy, not this custodial intermediated privacy that most people tout today. And to do that, you need to run your own server. Running your own server is hard. It's very, very hard. It's super, scary and requires a lot of time and a lot of skill. And there's 5 people on earth who can do it effectively or have the patience for it. And that's the essence of the problem, is that the only solution to real digital privacy is personal servers and private clouds. And yet personal servers and private clouds are nearly impossible to achieve for 99.999% of the population. That was the observation that we made as a group about 6 years ago. As we said, wow, there's this massive problem in the world called surveillance, censorship, extortion, and security, third-party, custodial security risks. And then there's this inability of anyone to get out of that because they lack a skill. And we saw that as an opportunity, not just a business opportunity, but an opportunity to have a purpose in our lives and to do something meaningful and build a tool and technology that bridges that gap, that closes the gap and solves the problem. And so the tool that we built, the thing that we do, is called StartOS. It is an operating system for a personal server. It's a Linux-based OS whose graphical interface, the thing that you actually see on the screen, is purpose-built, specifically designed to enable a normal person to own and operate a personal server. was a bit long-winded, but I think I actually got off track from your original question.
No, it's great. I was
from like,
hoping
what
for
is the
some.
ideal stack, right?
Yeah, no, I was hoping for some Matt rants, so it's all good. So let's say somebody buys a new MacBook Pro, they get it out of the box, and then they have a Start9 server.
Yep.
Is that like, where is that on the privacy playing field, and is it really getting towards what you want to get towards, or because it's working with like a MacBook, it's still not overly private and secure?
It's if you're an enemy of the state, you shouldn't use a MacBook.
Yeah.
If you're not, you're probably fine. Because we know, right? We, the Linux people and IT people and cypherpunks, know if a signal is going out the door to report back to Apple. Like, you can see that in the packets, right? Going out over the router to the internet. So like, we know that, an average MacBook is not just like reporting everything that you do back to Apple, right? Like, that would be a breach of trust and security, and under Apple's own statements, right? And we know that it's not happening because you can look at the packets and see that that's not happening. If you connect to Apple servers, like if you connect your MacBook to iCloud, then you're guaranteeing that happens, because you're literally opting into it and being like, hey, I'm going to like show you every file and communication that I have. But if you do not connect the client device to the Apple servers for particular use cases, I think it would be a stretch to imagine that Apple is doing sort of like keystroke monitoring or screen recording and then covertly shipping that data off to Apple without anyone having ever caught on to this, right? There is a degree of respect for local privacy, right? Like, what you do on your computer, unless there is malware installed that's doing the things I just described, is in all likelihood going to remain on that computer, and not be reported back to Apple or to the government. Again, if you're on the wanted list, I'm sure that there are toggles Apple can do to make that start happening. But they can't do it for everyone. It's an intractable problem to basically monitor every keystroke of every person. Maybe they're working towards that into the future dystopia, but at the moment, I feel fairly confident that my client MacBook is not just carte blanche reporting everything that I do on the device itself back to Apple. So again, depends on your threat model. If you are not a person of interest, then you can probably assume that your laptop is not, just wholesale selling you out.
So putting a Start9 on top of that, or like integrating that into that stack, or into that device, what would that practically do for you from where you are as just like a stock user of like a MacBook?
Yeah, I mean, so if you connect your MacBook to a Start9 server, what you are doing is you're introducing another vulnerable point, right? You're introducing an attack vector, which is the MacBook itself. So if someone wanted to come after you, or surveil you or censor you, they could gain access to your private server cloud network through the MacBook, if they were able to compromise it, like if they got their hands on the device itself, or if Apple switched on its backdoor because suddenly they got subpoenaed and were told to do so. So again, just the less points of entry, the better. But ultimately, this is a impossible kind of. There is no permanent solution here, right? Like, we've made the statement multiple times that, like, if you are on the FBI's top 10 list, like, nothing is going to work for you, right? Like, that isn't the point of what we do. What we are doing is we're trying to deter the ever growing movement of mass surveillance and censorship, extortion, and poor security by giving individuals just enough defense to make it too expensive to pursue that course of action, right? It's like if every citizen had a gun, okay? If you're an enemy of the state, that gun is going to do nothing for you. Nothing. But if everyone has a gun, it sure the hell prevents a runaway authoritarian state. So that's kind of the same model here. So we almost view the proliferation of personal server technology as the sort of digital 2A. It's a way to ensure that you are reasonably protected as an individual, but that if every individual is reasonably protected, then society is extremely robust and resilient to the authoritarian slide.
Sure.
So there is no perfection is kind of the point. The degree of perfection that you require depends on how important and you are and how big of a target you are, right? If you are a very famous person and everyone's trying to hack you, or the state is after you and you're on the run, don't use a MacBook, okay? But again, like for the majority of people out there, until there is some disclosed known attack vector or vulnerability, you can assume that the majority of your computing interactions are not being leaked back to Apple. That would seem like a huge deal to me if that were to come out. And again, it can't be hidden, right? If your computer is leaking information, you see that. I don't expect everyone to now turn on their router packet inspection and start looking for malicious activity back to Apple, because you can't. I mean, I could decipher that, but I guess maybe I'm just being a little too optimistic here and assuming that really smart cypherpunk people who are better than myself at some of this have done that, like have turned their MacBook on and done a bunch of crazy shit and seen if it got shipped back to Apple. I don't know.
Yeah. So integrating like the personal server like that with a MacBook, you could still get all the stuff we talked about with the perfect stack, right? Or the baseline stack, which is like the file storage, the end-to-end encrypted messaging, things like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Let's touch on here. Part of the premium product of the server Pure is that the IME is disabled, which is kind of a rare thing, and it adds extra privacy and security, right, compared to most server options out there.
Yep.
Can you just walk everybody through what the IME is and what it does and why it's so important that this is disabled with your Start9 server Pure?
Yeah. So, as we're just talking about kind of the security profile of different devices, most people do not realize that at some layer of the computing device, there's code that's doing something that you can't see. And it's called closed source software. MacBooks, riddled with it, right? Like the whole thing is closed source. You have no idea what it's doing. Again, you can see if it's reaching out over the internet, but you have no idea what it's doing inside, right? So, for example, I wouldn't put it beyond reason that many computers are doing keystroke tracking internally, right? Like everything you do is being kind of recorded on the device itself. Even if it's not being shipped out and reported to somebody, it can be being recorded locally and you'd have no idea, okay? And so the more open source the software stack is, the less likely there is a program on the computer doing something of that sort. So when you buy a MacBook off the shelf, you have no idea what's happening inside that computer. Nobody does, except the very, high clearance people at Apple. Nobody else knows what's happening on the computer. But when you get, a laptop that is running an open source Linux distro and core boot firmware, you can now, be 99% sure that there is nothing like that running on the computer. Okay? Like, you can't be 100% sure, but insofar as the software is open source and vetted, right? That the software has been reviewed extensively, that it's a popular piece of software that lots of people run and has been audited and tested over time and is open source, and you compiled it yourself and flashed it to the computer yourself, if you do that, then you can be 99% sure that there is no malicious program running on that device. However, even beneath the firmware, there's software being executed at the lowest level of the chip itself, right? At the very, very low level of the hardware, sort of underneath the firmware. And so even if you have an open source operating system and you have an open source firmware, right, which is what the server peer has in core boot, the chip could still be doing something. And in this case, Intel has a program that is installed at the lowest level called Intel Management Engine, IME. And it is closed source and sort of a known kind of spyware Intel, backdoor type of thing. I don't know exactly what it does. Nobody knows exactly what it does, and that's kind of the point. The point is that it's some chunk of code that Intel shoves into their chips. It's completely closed source and doesn't tell anybody what it does. It's bad. And there's no real way to avoid it because you can't make your own chip, right? We're talking about like extreme engineering, resources to do something like that. It took Apple like 2 decades to make their own chip. And they had $1 trillion, in 2 decades. So it's very, very hard to do. And so we're sort of forced to use Intel chips and AMD chips. And both have this crap running on them. And so what some open source developers have done over the years is they've really literally gone into the bytecode of the firmware that governs the chip and just started deleting chunks of it, almost at random. Like, hey, here's a chunk of code, let's delete it. And then see what happens, right? Let's fire the computer back up and see if this thing is still working. And if it is, okay, that wasn't it. Let's delete this other chunk of code. And eventually you delete the right one, and Intel's management engine is no longer running on the device. And so you go, we did it. We disabled this chunk of software that clearly has no purpose, is not required to run the computer. The computer runs great without it, right? So it clearly was extracurricular, but is now no longer running. And so it's considered disabled, IME disabled. And so the server peer that we offer is one such device. It is running open source Linux distro in the form of StartOS. It is running core boot firmware, or a flavor of core boot called Pure Boot, fully open source, and has Intel's management engine disabled. So it is arguably kind of the most open and secure of a device that you can get in this world. Still not 100% guaranteed, but it's your best shot. And there's very few devices like that out there.
And the base model is the server 1?
Server 1, yep.
Yeah. Does that have IME enabled?
No, because it's an AMD chip, but AMD has their own version of IME, which is chugging right along on that device.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a computer. We call it the server 1 it's a computer. It's like any other computer that you would buy out there. Doesn't mean it's malicious and spying on you. It just means we don't know, right? It's like any other computer or phone in the world. Is maybe it's doing something bad or nasty down there. Maybe it's not. We don't know.
Got it. Okay. And what's the practical maintenance routine to keep a Start9 server secure and private? And how often should users update software or back up their data? Do you have any personal recommendations on sort of hygiene?
Yeah, sure. You want to keep it somewhere relatively, inconspicuous. Like, you don't want to advertise to every neighbor who walks by that you're running a Lightning node on your personal server. Or something like that. But for the most part, physical security is not a concern for the majority of people because your server's just not worth enough for somebody to risk their life and liberty to break into your house and try to steal steal your pictures or something like that. Like, so physical security is not a big concern. But that said, you still shouldn't put it in your window and advertise the fact that, it has sensitive data on it or potentially even money. So, that's one. Two is don't be the first person to update anything ever, whether it's a new version of StartOS or some service that you have installed on the server. When a new version of anything comes out, you should probably wait a few days or a couple of weeks, let other people around the world update the software. That way, if there's a bug or if some malware snuck in or something, let somebody else kind of get burned by that, and then they report it, and then it's known, and then a fix comes out, and then you didn't. Now, obviously, somebody has to be first, so somebody will not listen to me. But depending on how important the stuff is that's running on your server, don't be the first person to update. I have multiple servers, and one of them is for the purpose of being the first person to update everything, right? It's my test box. There's nothing on it that could be hurt or impacted. And then I have like my, couple really high important servers that have more important information on them. And sometimes I'll wait a couple months before I update stuff on those. Otherwise, backups are a necessity. You need to create regular backups. Basically, anytime anything on the server changes, you upload more files, you open or close some lightning channels, whatever it is you're using the server for. If you care about the data that's on it, you need to create regular backups. On StartOS, that's easy to do. You plug in a drive to the server and click backup, or you can back up the server to another computer on the same network. We also, in a future version of StartOS, not the next one, but the one after, we'll be introducing automatic cloud-based backups where you can create a schedule for your server where it will automatically back itself up to kind of any destination, whether that be a drive that's plugged into it, another computer on the LAN, could be another server that you have in another house or another state even, or you could back up to Google Drive or iCloud. And we think that that is a reasonable use of those types of services, is to store your fully encrypted backups on them. It's a cheap way to get, backup storage. And because it's encrypted, they don't know what the hell it is. They just see a bunch of blobs on their server.
Got you. Perfect. So for somebody that's new to running a Bitcoin node on a Start9, what are the steps to set it up securely and privately, in the sense that, you're minimizing data leaks, things like that, or public exposure?
Yeah. If you really don't want anyone to know that you have a server, you should build it yourself. You should not buy it from us. You should go out and buy a laptop or mini PC from a local computer store, or just repurpose one of your old MacBooks or laptops or mini PCs, and then download and flash StartOS onto it. So now you have a server running StartOS, and nobody, including Start9, knows that you did this. And from there, the setup process is very secure. We went through quite a bit of hassle to make sure that the setup process was secure. The only way that somebody could intercede your initial setup, because there is a sensitive period of time, right? Whether you take the server out of the box or you just got done flashing it, where you now need to set it up. There's this little window of opportunity where if somebody knew you were going to do this, and they knew like when you were going to do it, and they were on your LAN, like literally connected to your Wi-Fi network, which means they would need your Wi-Fi password. This is a highly, highly targeted, very precise attack. Then they could spoof your server UI, right? You could go to start.local to set up your server and be looking at a fake website that looks exactly like the real one would look. And at the end of that process, you are entering a password that would then be leaked. And then obviously they could have then access to your server forever without you knowing. That is not a reasonable attack vector for anyone that I know, even high threat target people, right? You're talking about like white van type stuff. And so anyway, it's not a real attack vector. So the setup process is very secure. And then as long as you don't lose your password or leak your password, you're good to go. By default, nothing on StartOS ever touches the public internet, right? I shouldn't say that. Nothing is hosted on the public internet. So when you want to access your server, you either have to be connected to the same local area network, right? The same network at home, or you're using Tor when you go remote. So if you leave your house, go to the other side of the world, and you want to talk to the server that's in your house, you're going to use the Tor network. Both of those are invisible, private, anonymous, secure. We have no reason to believe that either of those are compromised in the way that we are using them. However, that introduces a bit of a UX challenge, because while local connections are fantastic, right? That's the best connection possible. Fastest, doesn't go out over the internet, everything's talking on the LAN, right? It's private, secure, it's fast. That's great. Tor sucks, right? Tor is very slow, to the point of almost being unusable at certain times if the network is under attack, which it often is. And so it's been a pain point for a lot of our users, including myself. And so in the next version of StartOS, which is now performing very well in testing, there are additional networking options, such as remote private VPN access, as well as ClearNet hosting. So if you actually want to put something that's on your server on the public internet, you can do that. It comes with a little bit of a warning sign of like, hey, be careful here. This is now a public. It's in the public park, which means it can be attacked. Everything is going to be visible. There's still passwords to log in and whatnot, but there's some drawbacks. That's all.
Got you. Okay. Let's shift a little bit to home mining with Start9. Bitcoin mining is kind of at an all-time high in terms of getting traction at home with tools like the BitAxe. Where does Start9 come into, a small-scale mining operation in terms of helping make it more private and sovereign? And how can users ensure their mining activity stays private in relation to all of what we've been talking about?
Yeah, so you're right. Home mining is exploding right now. And for the right reasons, I believe it's a sustainable movement. It's not a fad. Whereas previous home mining, I don't want to call it a fad, but it was definitely unsustainable, right? Like the previous wave of home mining was to make money. It was to, like mine and try to make an income. And there was a time in the past when that was, possible, but it's been dead for years, and people were doing it anyway, even at a loss, hoping it wouldn't be dead for some, in some way. But the new wave of home mining is about the lottery, right? It's about spending a small amount of money every month to possibly win the lottery and get a huge payout. That is extremely private, by the way, right? If you're actually solo mining, like this is an invisible payout. So if you wanted to keep it secret, you could, and just have this stack of Bitcoin that nobody on earth knows about. And if you don't win the lottery, which you probably will not, your monthly bill, right, the amount of electricity that you spent, has gone to a good cause. It has been donated to the Bitcoin network in the form of increased hash rate, which is increased security. So a lot of people would just pay the $3 a month to increase Bitcoin's security. But if they can pay $3 a month and possibly, get a huge payout at the same time, I think it's a win-win. I love the lottery approach to Bitcoin mining. The second approach to Bitcoin mining, which is not yet popular, but I think is a huge forthcoming movement, is the mining for heat. Okay.
Yes.
Tyler Stevens' book on Bitcoin mining heat reuse is a wonderful book, and I've talked with him extensively at this point about it, and I'm very interested in the industry that is going to be born of this, and I think that is also a huge use for home mining systems, heating your home, heating your hot water heater, and all that stuff. So anyway, on Start9, right, the way that the role of the Start9 server in this is that when you run a BitAxe or you run a space heater, doesn't matter. It's not really proper to think of that thing as a miner, right? That thing is a hasher, right? It's just producing hashes, and you need to then mine with those hashes, right? The hashes are used to try to mine a block, right? To prove that you did the work and are worthy of submitting the block that you've constructed. And the way that people have done this in the past, when hashing from home, right, is that they ship their hash off to a pool, right? They ship it to a miner, right? They're effectively selling hash to a miner, and the miner constructs the block and uses the hash that's being shipped from all these different hashers, eventually finds a winning one, right? Somebody submits a winning one without even knowing it because they're just submitting it blindly. And the miner then wins that block and then pays everybody out proportionally to how much hash they contributed. And it's a fine model. There's nothing wrong with the pool model, but it is not proper to call yourself a miner, right? You are not mining. You are hashing. You are selling hash to a miner. And so that isn't how you play the lottery with Bitcoin, right? That is how you try to produce an income with Bitcoin, is by hashing to a pool, which is not feasible for the vast majority of people, right? You're just not going to be profitable. You're going to lose money every month under that structure. You need a lot of mining power, modern equipment, and cheap electricity and all that for that to be a profitable endeavor. So when you want to solo mine, you need to be the miner. You not just need to be the hasher, you need to be the miner. And to be the miner, you need two things. You need a Bitcoin node and you need mining software, right? Stuff that knows how to do this. And in that, it's a Stratum server. And so there are a couple pieces of software on StartOS that you can install that will allow you to solo mine, to use hash that is produced from one or more devices in your home, whether it's a space heater or 15-bit axes. It looks like you got a couple back there. And use that hash to construct a block and try to solve it with the hash that's provided. And then when you do, use the Bitcoin node to broadcast your solution to the network and get paid. And so that's not an easy thing to set up traditionally, to like set up a Bitcoin node and set up a Stratum server and to configure it and to hook up the ancillary devices and then have it all work in such a way that if you do hit a block, you can, actually get your payout. And we make that very, very easy on StartOS. It's pretty straightforward. You just go install Bitcoin and then you go and you install public pool or datum. And then you can configure them to your liking. Again, pretty basic stuff. You can usually just use the defaults, and then and point your BitAxe to your datum server. Set it to lottery mode, and which is again just a setting in the datum settings. And you're off and mining. It only takes a few minutes to set up and be working. Now it's more complicated than it needs to be at present. Like the current StartOS has some technical limitations that probably extend the setup process by 3 to 5 minutes. Those have been solved in the next version of StartOS, and the setup will be, 5 minutes less. But either way, it's not a huge lift regardless.
Amazing. So things like that, mining with your own node, like a Start9, and, software like Hashpool. I don't know if you've heard of Hashpool. But things like that are really going to help, counter the regulatory scrutiny that maybe, small miners don't really face it, but miners, hashers in general do face it, and like KYC requirements for pools, stuff like that. This kind of helps alleviate that.
Yeah.
Awesome. You've said before that Start9 aims to end the need for trusted third parties. Looking ahead, what are the biggest threats to digital sovereignty and privacy from big tech, governments, or even within the Bitcoin community that you see?
So the biggest threat, and I don't want to say threat, because it's a general practice. The biggest adversary, right, our competitor, what we are up against, is the stolen fallacy, or the stolen concept fallacy. Okay, which means using words to mean their opposite. This is the biggest threat that we face in our towards our success, which is Apple coming out with a huge billboard and a Super Bowl commercial that says privacy, Apple. Like, you want to be private, you want to escape the matrix, come use Apple computers, right? It's clearly the opposite, right? It's like no, what you're selling is, you're not selling privacy. You're using the word privacy to sell computers, but the computer doesn't actually afford privacy, right? The computer.
I noticed they're starting to do that. Like, I just got a new MacBook and it has this AI Apple Intelligence, and one of the things that it's very clear about trying to say is that experience new levels of privacy.
Correct. No,
Yes.
it's so common in our world. Like, if you look for this, when I first heard about this is actually an Ayn Rand concept, the stolen concept fallacy. She invented this phrase to identify a practice, right, that is highly common in statecraft and in business practices, to effectively use words to sell their opposite, right? To say something that people like freedom, and then the product that they buy is contributing to their enslavement, right? It's everything is opposite day. It's like it requires a degree of understanding and critical thinking and judgment that, to be honest, the general population lacks, largely because of state education, right? Like the whole thing is designed very purposefully to produce people who are just smart enough to function in society, but lack the critical thinking and judgment skills to see through the trick, the fundamental trick of the stolen concept. Okay, so basically anything that comes out of big tech or the government always means it's opposite. Okay, so if Apple's selling privacy, what they're really selling is surveillance. Okay, they're just saying that we won't tell anyone, right? They don't even deny that. Apple won't come out and say, we're selling you privacy, as in we don't know anything about you. They would never say that, because it'd be so obviously a lie, right? They're just redefining privacy to mean something else. What they're redefining privacy to mean is, we are selling you something that will enable us to know everything about you, but we won't tell anyone. That's privacy, right? And I'm like, no, that's not privacy. You've stolen that word from us. And because they stole it, and because they have such a big microphone, and because their commercials are so colorful with people dancing, that nobody knows what privacy means anymore. They all think it means Apple surveilling you but not telling anyone else. And it's like, no, guys, that's not what it means. And so we rely very heavily on the educators, right? I think that this being our biggest battle to win the future means that the people with big microphones, who are also capable of creating colorful commercials and capturing the imagination, we need them on our side. We need the content creators and the educators and the filmmakers and the musicians to take back some of the words that have been stolen from us. And only with that growing understanding of the nature of things and the meaning of words can we hope to proliferate our technology at scale. Right? Unless that happens, it's always just going to be some niche counterculture out there using these real privacy and sovereignty tools. They'll never be adapted by the mainstream unless we take back the meaning and the culture. So that said, I'm optimistic in a sense because, as I mentioned earlier, the cloud computing paradigm isn't just a lie. It is unsustainable. It's dying, right? And so even if we don't take back these words, like let's say we fail in taking back the word privacy and educating people on what real privacy is and why they deserve it and why it's necessary for them and their great-grandchildren's freedom. Let's say we fail in doing that. You know what they will notice is an increasing monthly bill for basic communication tools. What they will notice is a gigantic hack of Google Photos where all their nudes got leaked to their friends and family. Okay. These are things that will happen and will cause people to question the existing system, even though they don't understand it or its alternative. They will still at least start asking questions and going like, wait a second, what's wrong here? I texted my friend that I didn't want to get vaccinated and suddenly my credit card turned off. Like, what's wrong here? You know, the more that happens, the more people will start looking to become educated, right? You can't make somebody want to learn something, but if they experience enough pain, then they will seek it on their own accord. And it is my hypothesis that the cloud computing paradigm and all the consequences that come along with it in the form of surveillance and censorship and high costs and low security will eventually become so bad, so horribly unsustainable and obvious that people will start looking up and going, what is the problem? How do we fix this? I can't take it anymore. And by then, our product will be so good and our educational material so good that we'll get them, or at least we'll get a big chunk of them. Right? And we don't need everyone. What we need is a critical mass of people who opt out of these third-party systems to make those third-party systems no longer profitable. That's all we need. We don't need everyone to switch over. We just need to break their business model, right? And the more people that leave, the more they will abuse the people who stay. The more they'll have to squeeze the people who stay, right? Because whoever stays has to now pay more to accommodate for the people who left, to backfill those revenues. And so it's at that point, it becomes self-generating, right? Self-sustaining. The more people who leave, the harder they squeeze, the more apparent the problems are, the more people who leave. The more people who leave, the harder they squeeze. And so we just need to get to that critical mass where this thing gets its own momentum. And I think we can shift the computing paradigm of planet Earth. And it won't just be Start9. Of course it won't just be Start9, right? It literally can't be. We're 100% open source MIT licensed. Like the second we become a thing at any meaningful scale, there's going to be 10 copycats that pop up and try to do what we do, and we'll succeed, some of them, at doing it almost just as well. We hope to be part of the conversation for a long time, but we by no means think that we as a company are going to like be some sort of dominant force in the private sovereign computing future. We just want to see it happen. I want to be there for it, you know?
Yeah. Why I think you're going to do, why you are doing such a great job is because you're not thinking that, you know, you have to dominate everything. You just want to be part of that revolution and provide the education and come on shows like this one and all the other great ones that you've done and host Twitter spaces and start to educate people that are ready to listen. And then when the pain gets great enough on people that aren't aware of this kind of stuff and the pressure ratchets up and the control structures are, you know, increasing their control, then they're going to look to people that provide education like you. And that's what I love about the way that you show up, is that you're willing to go out there and stick your neck out and educate people. And in something that's so niche and still in its infancy for a lot of people, right? Like a lot of people plug in a BitAx, but they don't immediately go and buy a node next. They buy more miners or more hashers, right? You know, that's something that is going to come a long way in the future. People are starting to see, hey, I'm going to take that next step and plug in a node and learn about privacy and sovereignty more. So I think you guys are really well positioned to be the leaders in that as we go forward. So
I hope so. Yeah. I'd love to be part of that future. Be great to make some money along the way too. You know, I'm not ashamed of that, but mostly I just want to see it happen. Mostly I want to be free.
Yeah. You know, the world is more, they're lacking sensitivity to just how surveilled they are, right? By governments, corporations, social pressure. What's the ethical case for prioritizing privacy, and how does Bitcoin's design maybe fit into this or conflict with it?
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding of history and humanity, privacy is necessary for the maintenance of a free society. If people cannot conduct their affairs in private, then there is no check on runaway power. Okay, like you need resistances have to be able to form. Okay, so if you have some despot who's gradually growing his power and building up, an army and surveillance, and people see this happening, and they're like, oh my God, there's this horrible person who's like gradually gaining a chokehold on our entire, society. We need to stop them. Let's meet up and discuss how we can do this. If you can't do that, if it is impossible to communicate with like-minded individuals who disagree with incumbent powers, there is no check on those incumbent powers. They can just squash out anything at the sign of first resistance. And so again, it's sort of like 2A, right? It's sort of like the right to bear arms. It's like if you disarm the population, there is no way for the population to hold the rulers accountable. They can just do whatever they want and nobody can do anything about it, right? So we're really just talking about force here. We're talking about, can tyranny perpetuate itself, or is there a check against tyranny? And the check against tyranny is the same as in any physical battle. There's two aspects, two high level, I should say, aspects to kind of winning a fight. One is brute force, one is firepower, right? And the other is comms, communications. Can you coordinate your activities, right, across time and space? And if the answer to either of those is no, you're kind of screwed. You're going to lose. You're going to lose that fight. And so Americans especially focus a lot on gun rights, on the firepower aspect of maintaining a free society. And yet those same people will just like use, like they have no means of actually coordinating amongst themselves if they ever had to use those guns. Like if it ever came to the point where American citizens were taking up arms against a tyrannical regime that had gained control of the country, those guns are going to be useless if one person can't call someone else and be like, hey, this is where we're going. This is where we're meeting.
Using iMessage to coordinate the attack. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, come on, guys, you're using their lines of communication to try to fight them. That's not going to work. This never worked. You're just going to die. So we think it's really important. Privacy is really, really important. It's also really, really hard in an information surveillance society, right? It's very hard to be private in the world today, but it is not impossible. I feel very confident citing the technology that I work on as being effective in this way. I would challenge, and a serious challenge, I'd like to see it attempted, for a surveillance agency or two to try to surveil somebody who's using our tech. Like prove it, show me, break it, surveil it, get through. Right? I want to know. I'd love to know, because it would at least help me, to know if we're missing something, if we've missed some angle. But I think, as far as we can tell, that these things are highly effective. Again, if you are not a highly focused target. If you're a highly focused target, you're worrying about physical security at that point, right? Like they've tapped into your literal internet fiber optic cable. Like there's nothing you can do. But if you're just a normal person looking for a degree of privacy in your life, so that you don't fall victim to the four, right? If you don't fall victim to censorship, surveillance, extortion, and poor security, then these things will work for you. Okay, so that's one. That's sort of the philosophic argument for privacy. It's just a fundamental prerequisite to the maintenance of a free society. How does Bitcoin play into this? Bitcoin is shockingly not that private, right? It is lacking in privacy features. This was clearly a shortcoming, right? Satoshi did not want Bitcoin to be as in private as it is, but you cannot be perfect, and you cannot foresee all challenges, and Satoshi's not an omnipotent god. Satoshi made coding mistakes, literally, right? Like built something incredible, but incomplete and flawed, and because it's so important, you can't just go change this stuff, right? Like there's trade-offs everywhere, right? It's extremely risky to change anything in Bitcoin, as we've seen, especially recently. Like even minor things is just like, it's so important, and everyone is so invested in it, both financially and philosophically, that changing anything is going to trigger a lot of people, no matter what it is. And so we can't really go fix some of these problems. We just can't. We cannot go into the base layer and fix Bitcoin's privacy problems. We sort of have to learn to live with them, so to speak, right? We can fix some of them, and we have made improvements over the years. And a lot of these things can be solved at second layers as well, right? Like Lightning is very private. And so again, we are solving it, but imperfectly. And but it is important. We should never give up trying to make Bitcoin and tools that use Bitcoin more private, always.
Agree with you 1,000%. Do you think, is there a point where the pursuit of absolute privacy conflicts with societal needs in any way, or
No.
for you it's no?
No.
Okay. Beautiful.
No.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the only argument that anyone can make there is that you can't catch the bad guys, right?
Yes.
Like
we
if
know
someone's
that
out there
fallacy.
using these privacy tools to steal and murder, if the tools are that good, like if they're so good that they can't possibly be broken, then those people can act with impunity. My argument in response to that, right, is one, you're talking about destroying society, human freedom and dignity, and possibly, causing nuclear war in order to prevent one mass murderer. Okay, because these people are one in a billion, right? Real sociopaths who would do shit like this. You don't build all of society in order to accommodate them. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Number two is these tools will never be that good, right? They will never get to the point where good old-fashioned detective and law enforcement efforts can't succeed, right? Like if somebody is out there doing horrible shit on a continual basis, there are ways to find them, even if they're using privacy tools, right? Like it will never be perfect because privacy is imperfect. This is actually a good thing, right? It's a good thing that these tools are imperfect because it is the window you need to then catch the people who are abusing them, right? Because if enough people agree that this is an incorrect use of the technology, then you can coordinate efforts. You can implement the neighborhood watch. You can, you know what I mean? Like this is how the world used to work before the digital age. It's like everyone had a gun. And yes, some people could go around shooting people, but eventually they're going to get caught. And then you can implement deterrence, like, justice is a deterrent. And I'm all for justice. And my concept of justice is about as basic and good old fashioned as it can get, which is eye for an eye. And I add one more to that, which is 2 eyes for an eye. Okay. That's my concept of justice. I think that's what works. Whatever somebody did should be done to them, plus a little more. That's it. You steal from somebody, you get your money taken, plus a little more than what you took.
Interest, right? On top, yeah.
Yeah, but it's interest. It's like, because otherwise it's just a wash, right? They didn't actually pay the price, so to speak. But that's my concept of justice. You kill someone, you're dead. Right?
Fair enough.
That's it.
Awesome. No, I agree with you. There's got to be aligned incentives and there's got to be deterrence. But privacy is still the most fundamental, right that we have. So
I think so.
Yeah, good to see tech like this, upholding that. Do you see that there's any possibility for governments or tech giants to put regulations or walled gardens around tech like Start9, private
How
servers?
could they? Yeah, it's a moot question to a degree, because it's like we can't be regulated, really, right? Open source software, like you can make a broad argument of like, should creating software be a licensed activity, and without a license warrant criminal prosecution? Sure. It's actually been brought up, right? To be honest, with as crazy as the way things get these days, it's not even that far fetched. But that's really the only way that you could control, regulate something like StartOS. Is you would have to make writing code, which has continually been upheld as free speech, illegal without a license.
Well, they did try to do that to the samurai guys, so I was just a little curious.
Well, they didn't make writing code illegal.
Okay.
Right? Samurai guys were running servers that was executing the code that they wrote. That's very different. I'm not saying the samurai guys did anything wrong or deserve to be imprisoned. What I'm saying is that isn't what they were gotten for, right? Like Start9 as a company and me as an individual, I in no way provide a service, right? Like there's no server. I'm not running a server that people are connecting to, right? I'm not running a service-based business here. What we did is we wrote code and we published that code to the internet. We gave it away for free. And people can do whatever they want with that code. It has nothing to do with us. So it is a different layer. It would require a different level of absurdity and attack, right, to come after me or us for what we are doing versus what it took to go after the samurai guys. The what do you call it? The excuse, I guess, for going after them was that it wasn't the code that they wrote. It wasn't the fact that people were doing what they were doing. It's that Samurai was facilitating it. It was like, okay, you're dialing our server. We're going to perform some service for you, and then we're going to charge you for that service. And the result of it is money that was once tagged or identified is now no longer tagged, right? And from a traditional mindset, from like the traditional FinCEN judiciary mindset, that's just money laundering. They're like, whoa, okay. Somebody came in here and dropped a bag of bills off at your table. They were all marked as being belonging to some person, and you put them in a machine and tumbled them together with other people's bills and then dished them back out and then took a fee for that service. You have literally performed the service of cleaning money. Obviously, that's not the reality of how these systems work, right? But it takes time for these archaic systems to catch up to the modern era. So I understand why it happened, and I'm not surprised that it happened. I'm also very against that it happened, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, we just saw the latest development is that there was allegedly some things being hidden from the defense, and that they shouldn't, or FinSec didn't consider it a money laundering service. So we'll see how that all plays out over the next little while. But yeah, hopefully they get justice for themselves, and they don't fall victim to these archaic rules and laws. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that in any time of transformation, there's just all these misunderstandings and people fall through the cracks, and
awesome.
And there's always corruption.
Along quite clearly. Yeah. Your work with Start9 suggests a vision of a world where individuals are able to take back control from these trusted third parties. What kind of cultural or psychological shifts are needed for people to embrace self-reliance through things like Bitcoin, personal servers, or even home mining? Are we seeing signs of this shifting in 2025?
I think we have. There's always a movement somewhere, right? Like people want to be part of something. Everyone, I think it's biological. Okay, like humans want to feel like they are a part of a movement that is for the better, right? Something that they morally agree with, something they believe will result in a better world. Everyone always kind of uh, cooks up this golden era in their head of like when humanity had it right, like that was those were the days, that was the time. It was never that time, and it will never be that time. Okay, this is part of our nature, is change and transformation and growth and corruption and revolution, and it's just a pattern of the stars, right? Like we are not exempt from basic fundamental forces of nature. We are born of them, we are of them, and these patterns will persist forever. So it's always the fourth turning, it's always the second turning, it's always the third turning somewhere, right? This is a constant transformation, endless spiraling into the same pattern that represents differently each epoch. So with that in mind, it's what's yours, right? What's ours? What's our thing? And I think that in any time and place, there's probably lots of failed little movements and revolutions where everyone gets all excited about, or some group of people get really excited about this new idea, and it's like, oh, it's this new religion we've cooked up, and we're gonna spread it, and it's gonna do this, and then it doesn't, and they get killed by their competitors, or they just become irrelevant over time, or they couldn't get critical mass, whatever. But then there's some that like take hold, like some movements that really kind of get that critical mass, and then they just become this self-sustaining movement, and they just wreck history. They like come in and they just completely alter the course of human history. And then, of course, there's a new one that spawns later on and all the rest. And I think what's happening in Bitcoin and more broadly sovereign computing could be one of those types of movements, historically speaking, right? Like this isn't a fad. We're way beyond that. Mm-hmm. I also don't think it's one of these, boy, that was really promising until they squashed it because of blah, blah, blah. It could be one of those, but I really don't think so. I think that this has legs under it, unlike almost anything we've seen in modern history. And I think it has that because it needs to. It's time, right? Bitcoin is not just something we cooked up. This wasn't just somebody or some group of people bored being like, hey, let's do this new thing. Let's do money differently, right? And through that, let's change minds and culture to the point where people are now responsible for themselves in the digital world, and not children. That wasn't it. That is what's happening, but it came about through necessity. This was like something that you do when you're about to die, like your life is on the line, and you reach for the only thing in reach to save your life and block the critical blow. It's like, that's Bitcoin. This is it. If this doesn't work, if Bitcoin and the movement that is building around it doesn't work, we're toast, man.
Oh, brother, I think about that all the time.
We're toast.
It's literally that. It's like the last bulwark, shielding yourself from the blow of the axe coming down on your throat. And if it doesn't, like, that's literally how important I see this, and clearly you do too. Yeah, and just looking at like how it came about and when it came about, right after the 2008 financial crisis, and how the world was, what it was pointed towards in the world, the future, what it was looking like, and then this beautiful invention came out, and it's fundamentally reshaped the future ever since, and is going to continue to do so. And particularly in third world countries or like Africa, where you really see the impact on the ground. So excited to see. And I agree with you. I don't think this is just going to go away anytime soon. We're far past that, and it's just a matter of just continuing to get the best and brightest minds working together and realizing its importance.
Something that occurred to me a long time ago. It's arguably the most profound epiphany I've ever had. And nobody, when I say it, will appreciate it as such, because I think I fail to maybe understand myself, or at least communicate the incredible nuance and profoundness of the statement, right? Because I've said this to a few people and they're just like, yeah. And I'm like, no, did you hear what I said? Like, so I'll say it, and it ties into just what you were talking about, which is, I was traveling. It was about, how old am I? It was almost 15 years ago. I was traveling, and nothing worked in parts of the world, right? Like, buses were late and bathrooms didn't work, and it's like the world doesn't work well. Like growing up in America, in a fairly privileged way, we weren't poor. You just sort of expect things to work. And now we're at the days of dinner being dropped off at your front door after you push 3 buttons on your phone. The convenience that we experience on a daily basis, many of us, at least in this country, is really off the charts compared to all of human history and humanity. And when you get out of that bubble for a second, you go to some other places, even today, where they're leaps and bounds ahead of historical societies, it can be shocking to be like, whoa, why don't you guys have this amenity? Why don't you have this convenience, right? And I found myself asking that question. I was like, what the fuck are you, why has nobody in this country done this thing? We have it over in the US. There's no fundamental limitation why you couldn't do it here. It's not like entrepreneurship is illegal, right? I don't even remember what the specific one I was thinking about was when I had this epiphany, but it was like very doable. I was like, dude, you could do that. And then I thought to myself, the immediate thought occurred to me as a kind of an entrepreneur at heart, right? Just my way of thinking, and also a literal experienced entrepreneur. The next thought occurred to me, if I was over here, I would do that. Like if I lived here, I would do that. I see it as an opportunity. It's a pain point of the society. I could solve that pain point with a product and service, make a bunch of money in the process, and improve the society, right? That's my way of thinking. And then my next thought was, well, I'm not going to move here, so I'm not going to do this. And the next thought was, well, maybe nobody will then, right? And then the last thought, which led to the epiphany, was like, oh, the reason that this convenience, amenity, feature, product, etc., doesn't exist in this place at this time, it's not because somebody hasn't built it yet. That's too basic. It's more profound than that. It's because I haven't built it yet. It became very personal to me. This was like a breakthrough in my mind. It was like, wait a second. I cannot, should not, and in fact, I'm insanely entitled to even ask the question, why has nobody done this yet, if I myself have not? It's like, it was just this boom, like, okay, the reason we are not on Mars yet is because I haven't gotten us to Mars yet. It's insanely arrogant and vain from a certain lens. But if taken within reality and tempered, it's actually a very, very powerful way of viewing the world and your place within it. Don't ever complain about something. Fix it. Or don't. But don't sit there and be like, someone should do this. This is how it should be. And then go back to your life.
And that's what people do. That's largely, I agree with you. That's largely why society is lacking or dysfunctional in so many ways, depending on where you are. And context and lens is everything. But it's because everybody says, well, maybe this is too simple, but like, when you go to the grocery store and people don't put their carts back, and they say, well, fuck it, I don't have to put my cart back. There's somebody else that works here that should put their cart back for me, right? It's like you should be taking personal responsibility, right? And so, to your point, things aren't built because you didn't build them, right? And if everybody just said, well, I can build the solution to this problem, we'd have those solutions to those problems.
But instead, people just want to complain about the fact that it doesn't exist and that someone should do something about it. And so that was it. And I had already kind of acted like that. Again, that was kind of my baseline operating system, was to do things that I felt should be done. But it wasn't until I fully like wrapped my head around it from this multiple layers and experienced it in the world where I felt that weight of responsibility, that weight of duty almost, of being like, okay. And what comes along with it, which is purpose, right? Which is something that very valuable that few people have. And that only comes along with taking responsibility for something important or something that you perceive to be important and shouldering it and dealing with the stress and the weight of knowing that if you don't do it, nobody will. And that if nobody does, everyone's fucked. That's a thing, right? And again, it's an exaggeration. But to a degree, that is kind of how I feel about the work that I do. I think it's important. And if I don't do it, nobody's going to. And if nobody does, my grandchildren are in deep shit. And that's how I wake up every morning.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Extremely beautiful and powerful. And I appreciate you, feeling that you can be, open enough to share that. I know a lot, for some people that'll just go right over their heads, but, hopefully for a lot of the people listening to this, that will spur them, they're Bitcoiners, they're home miners, that will spur them into more action for themselves and more personal responsibility. And how can you expect sovereignty in your life if you don't have personal responsibility, right? I think those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
How do you counter the argument that convenience, like, using a centralized exchange or cloud services is worth sacrificing sovereignty for most people?
Well, we're using a service right now, right? Do I think we've sold the future down the river, so to speak? This is called Riverside. That's funny. No, I don't. I don't have any qualms about this, right? Like, using central service provider, third parties for certain things at certain times because they afford convenience and they're cheap and easy to do is not a crime. The goal is to eat healthy. Doesn't mean you can't eat cake, right? It's like, just good hygiene does not mean perfect. It does not mean a sainthood. And so I don't have a problem with the existence of and the usage of certain third-party, tools, services, and products, including exchanges. It really kind of depends on who you are, why you're using the exchange. If your idea of being involved with Bitcoin is to create a Coinbase account and buy some and leave it on Coinbase, hope it goes up in value, and sell it for fiat, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say you're a bad person. We're not fighting the same fight.
Yeah.
Right? You're not even fighting. That's not fighting. Right? So it's fine. Do you. But don't in the same breath claim to be on my team. Right? You should be trying. If you want to be on this team, you want to be part of the movement, you got to put in a little bit of proof of work. You have to try to self-custody, right? Try to transact privately. Try to understand. Try to educate. Do something. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about it. These things will exist and should exist for certain use cases and certain people at certain times. But it is my hope that through education and mostly by matching the convenience of these central systems through decentralized products, that we will gradually just gain market share, so to speak, right? Like more and more people will do it the right way. I shouldn't have put that in quotes. Literally do it the right way. And eventually, the more people that do that, as I said earlier, the more the existing system just sort of spasms and starves. And eventually, we'll just take the whole market.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, well put. Let's wrap up, because I know we've been hashing a lot of things out here. I want to be respectful of your time, but we want to touch on a little bit about OpReturn, and then we'll go into what's coming for Start9.
Yep.
Cool. Give us a statement on OpReturn.
Well, let me pull it up here. So I'll do it verbatim and then we can talk about it for a second. So this morning, I put up a post from the company account that just says, filters work in the same way a tall fence or guard dog works. They can't stop every possible attack, but they deter most and raise the cost of success. We should be adding filters, not removing them, and all filters should be configurable. Power to the nodes. So let me break that down real quick. There's a little bit of nuance there behind the obvious kind of impact statement that it was designed to be, okay? Which is that filters do work. Meaning, for example, go to any wallet, okay, or raw Bitcoin Core node and construct a transaction that has an OpReturn output greater than 83 bytes, right? Put 100 bytes of data in there and broadcast it to the network. As you would any transaction, just send it to the network and tell me what happens. It's going to die immediately. It will not flood. It will not be stored in any mempools. That transaction will not make it further than the first node that you told it to. You hand the transaction to one of your peers or all of your peers, and they're all just going to drop it, every one of them. It will not get mined. It will not get into a block. The filters work. That's what it means to work, okay? It means the intruder, I don't even want to be that malicious. The person you didn't invite or don't want to come over, the guy you don't like, tried to come in your front door, and it was locked. Okay? It worked. Your lock worked. This guy you don't like can't get in your front door. Great. Fine. So then here come the counterpart. Here come the counter arguments. Well, that's bullshit because I could just take that transaction and go hand it to a miner. Okay. Go. You, right now, go do it. You just put together this transaction, 100 bytes, OpReturn output. Go hand it to a miner and get it into a block. Oh, you don't know how to do that. You don't have any miner friends that you can call and tell them to put it in. There's no product or app that you can use to submit it to a miner. Oh, there is. It costs $80 and you don't want to spend that much. Okay. Filters work. They work as a deterrent. They work to raise the amount of effort and cost that it takes to get a non-standard transaction into a block. You do not, just because it's possible to get a non-standard transaction into a block, does not mean you go unlock your front door, open it up, and invite all the people you don't like into your home. You don't make it easy for people to do things that are counter to the purpose of the house or the machine. You should make it as hard as possible on them, as expensive as possible. I am for small amounts of arbitrary data making it into the Bitcoin blockchain. I think there are valid use cases for small amounts of OpReturn data, such as storing a hash that functions as a notary and proof of existence of a document at a certain time in history. I'm for using Bitcoin as a notary service, as Open Timestamps does. I'm for pegging into Bitcoin for layer 2s, right? I'm for using Bitcoin as an anchor to launch an L2 network that allows people to transact off-chain. None of those require the kind of data and the amount of data that are being abused by people who are not trying to legitimately use Bitcoin, but are actively and openly trying to sabotage it by flooding it with spam. This happened to email. If people understood the fate of SMTP better, I think they might be a little more in favor of aggressive filtering in Bitcoin. Email faced the same challenge, right? Email was an open P2P decentralized protocol, communications protocol, that we call email, SMTP. And spammers flooded people with spam emails, with junk mail. In an effort to prevent the spam, we endowed a central party, a couple central service providers, namely Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, right, these tech giants, with the absolute authority on what is and is not spam. And email is no longer a decentralized protocol. Nobody should get to decide what is and is not spam except me in my inbox. I decide what is spam. Nobody else gets to decide that. And if I and everyone else agree that a certain thing is spam, then it won't even make it to my inbox, right? As that thing attempts to reach me, if everyone in front of me is like, that's spam, that's spam, that's spam, I don't even want to see it because I trust all these other people around me to tell me what is and is not spam. But that has to happen organically. That's a grassroots movement, right? That's consensus on what spam is and is not. But it could never have emerged. That consensus could never have emerged if I and others did not have the opportunity to state what we thought was spam and not spam. So my argument in that post was that we should be giving node operators more filters, more ways of saying that's spam, that's not spam, that's spam, that's not spam. Let the market, the edges of the network, decide for themselves what is and is not spam. And from that, through these votes, through this democratic process, there will emerge a consensus on what is and is not spam on Bitcoin. This isn't saying Bitcoin isn't for ordinals. It's like, let the people decide if Bitcoin is for ordinals. Let them choose to filter or not filter them. And if they don't filter them, then Bitcoin is for ordinals. If they do filter them, then it's clearly not. Even if the argument can be made, well, even if everyone filters ordinals, they're still going to just deliver them directly to the miner. Fine. Say like we can't stop that, right? At least we're not bending over for them. At least we're not opening the front door. At least we're making it more expensive and declaring that we do not want this, right? It's making a voice heard. Now, through that, right, you could end up with this end game of like, great, every node on the network is aggressively filtering ordinals, so no ordinals can make it through the network. But the ordinal people have this wonderful relationship with like 6 different miners, and they're just giving it to them, and it's in everybody's UTXO set anyway. Okay, let's say that reality comes to pass. Guess what? It would be so obvious that there is anti-ordinal consensus amongst the nodes that they could viably pull off a soft fork to actually end them. Okay? But without the ability to signal your opinion that you don't like these things, you cannot know if others agree with you or not. And so forking them out is insanely risky. So filters are not only a way of deterring certain kinds of transactions and raising the cost of those transactions, it's also a way of signaling to your peers what you think is and is not a valid transaction. And suddenly, if everyone on the network, 95% of the network, is all saying that they hate this thing, but this thing is happening anyway, now we can all turn to the miners and be like, guess what? Your buddies who are shoving these transactions to you and paying you millions of dollars, we're about to fork you off the network. The next block you mine is going to be Bitcoin Cash. Okay? Like, there is power in the nodes if and only if they have the ability to control their own land and tell others how they're controlling their land to see if they agree or not. And so that's what should be happening here. Core removing these filters is the wrong direction. We should be introducing new filters. We should be giving nodes maximum configurability.
Power to the nodes.
Yes.
Clearly.
That's why I said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's quite clear without, the nodes and what they like, how nodes function and the purpose that they serve, we wouldn't have what we have with Bitcoin. So this is, it's critical that we maintain that. So hopefully, your argument there can be something that people use to formulate an opinion? Because I think for the average person, this is over their head, but I think that they can understand, the need for filters, for choice, and for being able to signal through their node.
Yep.
Awesome. Matt, do you want to tell us what's coming next for Start9, the router, new OS, things like that?
Yeah. So first off, StartOS 040 is in testing. This is something that we, announced that we were going to build almost 2 years ago. We had not started it yet 2 years ago, but I was on a podcast at least at that point saying, "Hey, we spotted some major shortcomings of the operating system that we're going to fix, and it's going to be a huge change, and it's going to enable all these new forms of networking and features, and so we're going to build it." And it is very safe to say that we underestimated the amount of work that it was going to take to do this. It resulted in a full rewrite of the operating system. I don't use that phrase lightly. Nothing survived. We basically rewrote StartOS from scratch, from the front end code that you see in the browser to the low level Rust code, to the container runtime, to the database that we use. Everything was gutted. We just redid it once and for all. Okay, this is the last time we're doing something like that, simply because we have enough users and we matter enough now that we can't afford to do it again. This is our last chance, so to speak, to get the base layer right. We don't get another hard fork. Okay, StartOS will not hard fork again. This is it. So the wish list went into it. We did everything we wanted, and it took a long time. But we've been busting our ass on it daily for almost 2 years, and it's ready. It's almost ready. We're in testing. It's testing really well. There are still daily changes in code being merged, so it's not done yet. But we're getting close. I don't have an exact due date, but when it does get here, I am quite confident that it will not underwhelm. We did it. I think it's a masterpiece.
Beautiful. And did you want to touch on the router?
Yeah. Very, very excited about the router. The router is a critical component of the computing paradigm. They are not going away. Routers are the traffic controllers and policemen of the local network, of any network, right? So you have devices, whether it's cameras or doorbells, cell phones, laptops. They all need to use the internet. They may need to be reached from the internet. They may need to talk to each other. And all of this needs to be reliable and secure and private. And the router is responsible for that. That is the router's job, is to make these devices be able to reach out, outside devices to conditionally be able to reach in, and for these devices to reach each other in a way that is private, secure, and reliable. And we get asked a lot, which router should I get, by our customers? And so we thought we better have a pretty dang good recommendation. And so we vetted a lot of routers, not only because I want to use a great router that works well with a personal server and remote connectivity, but because I want to be able to recommend it to our community as well. And we couldn't find one. We couldn't find something that we really felt comfortable recommending for different reasons. Okay, things that were really usable were highly insecure or closed source, and things that were powerful and secure were required a graduate degree in networking. So there really was no product where we were like, this thing does what you need it to do, is built in accordance with open source and freedom principles, is easy to use, right? And is usable by the average person, which there just doesn't exist. So we set out to build it. We asked ourselves, what do we want in a router? We got to do that thing. We got to sit down at this drawing board and just go, let's design the ideal router. Let's put the wish list in, And that's how we started, was, I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And then each time we had an idea, we worked it into the, working kind of mock-up UI and found problems and was like, okay, we can't do that. That's just a pipe dream. Okay, well, that sounds viable. And then we did the hard work of being like, okay, what already exists? Because we're not going to build stuff that already exists. So is there already some open source operating systems or libraries that enable these kinds of features? And gradually we kind of pieced it all together until we had this working hypothesis of like, okay, that is the router. Not only is it the ideal router that we would like to have, but it's also very practical. It's feasible. We can do that. And we know how to do that. And that's where we were about 8 months ago. So there was about 8 months ago, we got to the point where we were like, I shouldn't say that. 8 months ago, we were at the point where we said, that's the ideal router. That's what we want. We had like this ideal. Then it was in October, which I guess is 6 months ago, where we had like a week-long hackathon where we basically dug into the gritty of all the things that we wanted to do to make sure that they could be done, that we weren't like selling a pipe dream here, that we could actually accomplish and kind of knew how to accomplish all of the things that we wanted. And by the end of that hackathon, we had actually scrapped some things and added some other things and reshaped some things. And so it was as of about 6 months ago, not only did we know what we were building, but we knew how we were going to build it. Since then, we've made a lot of progress. So it's off and running. We have an API that works. Like we have the inklings of a functional router, at least on the back end, right? Like the low level techie way of doing things. And we'll soon be building out a GUI to match it, which is the easier part, right? That's like the easy thing to do in this world, is to build a front end web application in front of a very complex back end operating system. So we're finished with a lot of the hard stuff, and now we're going to do the easy stuff. And I'm hopeful, not confident, but hopeful that we'll get it out by the end of the year. That's the goal. The goal is to get it out by the holidays. I cannot make that promise. I'm not even confident that it will happen. But again, we're going to try. We're going to try. And that's it. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best router in the world. It's completely open source. It's as powerful as anything you've ever used, and as easy to use as anything you've ever used. We got the best of all the things combined, and we're going to distribute it under the MIT license. So nobody will have to do business with us to use this. They'll be able to take their old router in many cases and just flash it with our router operating system and be off and running with a Start9 router without ever paying us a dime.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, that's I know how important this was to you, or is to you, from listening to you on other podcasts where you touched on the idea, and I'm sure I'm excited to see that available, commercially for people to buy, and also just speaks to the spirit of the kind of person that you are and the way that you do business, and why you create things. It's fully open source like that, and you can, just like with StartOS, you can use this and not pay you a dime, or you can buy it directly from you and support. So, yep. Yeah, that's amazing, man. It's a real good spirit that you have behind that. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you or learn more? Where's the best places to follow?
Our website is a great place to start, start9.com. We'll have links to all of our social channels. It's really just X and Nostr. We are not really active anywhere else. We do have a private community server that is gated and paid for the purpose of keeping out the spam and scammers. We were on Telegram and basically getting attacked on a daily basis. Our community members were getting attacked. And we finally understood that the only way to prevent scammers is to make them pay to get in. They'll never do it. And then even if they do, the first time they get caught spamming, they just get kicked off, have to pay to get back in. So it'll never happen. It's a very safe space for our community to engage. You get free lifetime access to it if you buy a server from us. If you don't buy a server from us, you can purchase lifetime membership to this private server for $300. Sounds steep, but you are getting literally 15 hours a day on demand, one-on-one access to a technical expert who will help you not only with StartOS or a Start9 server, but pretty much with any technical question you have about all of cybersecurity and computing. Like, we're talking about a highly valuable one-on-one lifetime membership to this server for $300. So we think we're severely undercharging it, but I don't want people to feel priced out. So, and it's free if you buy a server from us. So we have that, and that's the best place to engage with our team, our community, or me. I also am pretty easy to find. You can email me. You can find me on Matrix. You can find me on Telegram even. I'm not going to put all those out there right now, but I'm not hard to find if you want to find me.
Perfect. We will put all of your public links into the description of the show notes here so everybody can follow up if they have questions. But man, this is one of the best conversations I've had, not just on the podcast, but just on a personal level. It's been a huge goal of mine just to chop it up with you. So I really appreciate you taking the almost 2 hours that we've been yapping here to dive deep with me, man. That was really meaningful for me. So I appreciate it.
I was happy to be here. I enjoyed it too.
Good, man. Really means a lot that you enjoyed it. So with that being said, Home Mining Podcast is wrapping up and winding down this episode. Keep hashing, stay free, stay sovereign, run your own server, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks.